Welcome, everyone, to another episode of What Exits Jersey Stories. I'm your host, Nick Franco, and with me, as always,
Pete Riario.
And today we have a very, very, very special guest. New Jersey's favorite son.
Probably, maybe in the top 1,000. Maybe in the top 5,000 favorite sons.
You should put that under your headshot, Elliot. New Jersey's favorite son. Right?
There we go.
Now that it's been said, I can officially do it.
It's been spoken into the world, so it must be true. It's on the internet. So, New Jersey's own Millburn's own Elliot Kalin. Elliot, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited. I appreciate that you guys invited me onto the show. That you bore with me as I had to delay joining you until after a trip to New Jersey, which only made me more excited to talk about it. So
Great.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, no.
We appreciate you taking the time, Elliot. We know how busy you are, So.
Oh, anything for the Garden State, anything for my home.
Thank you.
I'm so far away from it these days. Any little chance I can get to be a part of it again, that's all I need.
So if Zach Braff asks you on this podcast after this, you'll say yes. Anything for the Garden State?
We'll figure. I mean, I'm more excited to be on this one, but
Thanks. That's a ringing endorsement.
I don't know why I'm negging Zach Braff. There's no reason for that.
Somewhere, Zach Braff is like, wait, somebody's talking about me in a.
He turns to his guests to get list, and he just crosses my name off. No, it would have been a huge career boost. Zach, please have me on.
Well, here's a question for you, Elliot. Being that you have grown up,
what exit 50B? Yeah, okay.
There we go.
The obvious question.
Yeah.
But what was it like growing up in Millburn? Like for those not familiar with the township of Millburn.
So Millburn, New Jersey, the town I grew up, I spent the first 17 years of my life there until I went all the way to New York for college. It's a pretty, nowadays it's a very affluent town. When I was growing up, it was a fairly affluent town. There's a section of section of Millburn called Short Hills, which likes to act like its own town, and they are very wealthy.
Yes, and the mall shows that.
Yeah, the mall at Short Hills. Yes, and they used to run these ads on TV. I'm sure you remember where they would say, "Your dreams are attainable." The mall at Short Hills. That's a big promise for a mall.
You're right.
And I worked there for a little bit, and it was not. I didn't see dreams being attained. A lot of expensive things were sold, but it's Millburn. When I was growing up, it was a pretty middle class to upper middle class town, and as I grew up, it got more and more affluent. And so, there's still kind of a real old movie theater there, but they've done their best to kind of make it seem like it's not a real old movie theater. Growing up, I felt very lucky being there because we had a lot of movie theaters in the area, which was great. There was a lot of, there's lots of diners in the area, which is fantastic, including the Millburn Diner, which was real.
Surprised at New Jersey, a lot of diners.
Yeah, exactly. But there was the thing that I think was most special about growing up in Millburn to me is that there's a fantastic theater right there, fantastic regional theater called the Paper Mill Playhouse, which would get a lot of performers from New York because it's a 30-minute train ride from Penn Station to Millburn. Mm-hmm. And so growing up, my parents were both, my mom is a New Yorker, and my dad grew up in White Plains. And so they lived in New York City for a while. And so they were very big theater going people, and that we would routinely go to the Paper Mill Playhouse to see shows, and the shows were just of a really high quality there. And it wasn't until I was older that I realized, this is not a thing that everybody gets to do when they grow up, is go to a professional level theater in their town. And I think it had a real influence on me wanting to go into the performing arts and into writing. But other than that, I don't know, Millburn, I appreciate Millburn now more as a grown up than I did as a kid or a teen. I never particularly liked it otherwise. It was fine, but it was very, I never really felt fully in place there. And the one place that really felt, other than the theater that felt special to me, is there used to be a comic book store in Millburn called One Flight Up,
One Flight Up. Okay.
Which was I spent so much time there growing up, and I got to know the owners really well. And that was like I was just very excited when a comic book store opened up right in town, because there was a comic store in the Morristown Mall, I think, but it was like super tiny. It was not great. And then finally, to have a comic book store there, but otherwise, it's the kind of place where growing up a lot of the like stuff like hardware stores and shoe stores would get turned into like yoga studios over time. And I was just there recently, and I was just like, there's like, this place seems so much wealthier than it was before. And it was still already like a well-off town, but now it's even more so. I was, when I worked at the Suncoast Motion Picture Company video store in the Showrooms Mall, and it was, and I want to make it clear, I grew up in the bad part of Millburn, on the border with Union Township. So,
okay.
So like, not really the bad part, but the part where like it was still fine, but it wasn't like mansions. That was over in Short Hills. But so I worked at this video store, and it was very clear that this was like a store the mall was not super happy about having, because it wanted like fancy bag stores and fancy shoe stores and things like that. And people would walk in, and this was when DVDs were still new. Like, they were new, and they cost $30 to $40 per DVD. They were very expensive. Yeah. And people would walk in and buy movies they had never seen for, $30, $40 a pop. And I just remember selling that. They'd be like, I just remember one time a guy goes, Eye of the Beholder. And that was with Ewan McGregor and Ashley Judd, I think. Anyway, it's like a thriller movie. This guy was like, Eye of the Beholder. I don't think I've seen that. Yeah, I'll take it. And it was like, this costs $40. Like
and it's not the Criterion collection.
No. It was just like the amount of time I spent in that store telling people that like, no, Back to the Future is not on DVD yet. Sorry. No, Star Wars is not on DVD yet. And I remember Jaws came out on DVD, and it was like, we couldn't keep them on the shelves. They were flying out of the place, Anyway, that's a long, rambling way of saying that Millburn was a fairly affluent upper middle class town that has only gotten more so. And growing up there, I felt like a real fish out of water. It was not my type of place. I always wished that I was growing up in New York. Although now I'm kind of glad that I didn't, because New York kids have that kind of 1,000-yard stare. They've seen too much, and they've experienced too much at too young an age.
Did you mention, is that comic book store still there? The One Flight Up?
No, unfortunately, it's not still there. It closed. I'm trying to remember how long. It must have been a number of years ago. It was after I was out of college, so it was after 2003. But I don't remember exactly when it closed. I kind of, there was a period in my life when I was like not going back home that often, even though it was a fairly short train ride from New York City. And it started as a store in Newark that was called One Flight Up, and they opened this one in Millburn that was called One Flight Up 2. Okay. And the guys there I just really liked a lot. It was a father and son who owned it. And
excellent.
The dad would sell like movie memorabilia and like, bootleg photocopied screenplays out of the back. But the rest was, just classic comic book store. And I just, I'd spend a lot of time there. I was your classic, like hanging around the comic book store kid.
Oh,
and then
I know that feeling.
Yeah, and I started working there, and then almost immediately broke the register, and so I didn't work there for that
long. And I'm guessing when you say broke the register, was it like that? That wasn't like a euphemism for, wow, the sales were like
no. We can't handle this volume of business. You gotta go. It was literally like there was a woman who like put down a cup of coffee on the counter, and I didn't see it there, and she went to hand me the books that she was buying. And I don't remember exactly how it happened, but the coffee got knocked into the register and just like wrecked the whole thing. And it was like,
oh man!
All right, so they were like, okay, this is like maybe next time don't tell them when they can put coffee right on the counter. Like we sell a lot of paper here.
Just so you know, by the way, Elliot, I did like the standard preparations for a podcast with Elliot beforehand. I got a podcast poster in the background here from your 2018 shows.
Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah. That was a good tour. This was our last live tour.
Yeah. And the most important thing, Popeyes.
Popeyes. Oh, yes. I came to Popeyes relatively late in life when I was a teenager. Before then, there was a Roy Rogers right on the outskirts of Millburn, or maybe it was. Did it bleed into the other town by then? I can't remember. But we'd go to Roy Rogers all the time. And then when I was at a certain age, my mom got tired of cooking for us a lot of the time. And she would cook for us plenty of times, but they were nights where she'd be like, I don't want to cook. We're going to do a Route 22 run. And we just drive down Route 22 and each kid would get fast food from the drive-through they chose. And I started getting Popeyes from there, and I never looked back. And I would look at it.
Good for you.
And it's just it's the only food that like I really start to want it if I haven't had it for a while. And now my older son, who's 7.5, we on the beginning of each month we have Popeyes lunch together. It's a very special thing now that I've inducted him into it.
Nice.
Oh, that's awesome.
Generation to generation. And there's a part of it's like now I think about this sometimes where I'm like, obviously I will feel weird if I die and Popeyes, the company, continues on, but I don't want it to go out of business before I die because I don't want to live in a world without it. Like, yeah, so it's this weird. I feel the same way about Marvel Comics, where it's like feels weird that like someday I'm going to die and there's still going to be new Spider-Man stories. Like that's strange. I'm going to miss out on them. But at the same time, do I want the company to go out of business before I die? No, of course not.
No.
I want to read those stories. Yeah, I need that chicken.
And like segueing in, being that you brought it up. Spider-Man, how do you feel the life that those couple of panels have taken? When for people that do not know, Elliot wrote Spider-Man the X-Men, the follow-up to when Death of Wolverine, because you had Wolverine the X-Men. So the follow-up was Spider-Man the X-Men, and the classic conversation between Spider-Man and Sauron.
Yeah.
I did read that actually.
Where Spider-Man says to Sauron, "You've got this technology that can cure cancer, but using it to turn people into dinosaurs." And it goes, "You're using this to turn people into dinosaurs with technology like that. You could cure cancer." And Sauron says, "I don't want to cure cancer. I want to turn people into dinosaurs." And I remember
he's someone that knew what he wanted.
Yeah. You got to look. He's honest about himself. He understands what he wants to do with his life. It's when I remember writing that panel and being like, I think I know why this is funny, but I'm not sure. Like usually I've been a joke writer for a long, long time now. And, for 20 years or so. And the professionally paid joke writer, not as long as that, but you know what I mean? But I was an amateur before that. But being like, usually I can write a joke and I can explain to you why it's funny. I can explain the logic behind it. And this one I couldn't really, when I first wrote it, it's just like, I just kind of think it is. And I hope other people think it is. And I like
I laughed.
Yep. Good, thank you. And it's taken on this new life online where people use it to explain when a billionaire is like, I'm going to shoot myself into space for 5 minutes rather than help people.
It's why don't you use your money for good? And it's like, no, I want to shoot myself into space for 5 minutes. It's like, here, refer to Spider-Man and X-Men.
Yeah, and it's so many more people have seen that panel now than read the original issue. So I wish that I wish that there was an easier way to link people back to that story so that they could read it. But at least whenever I see it on Twitter, usually someone replies tagging me, to say that I wrote it, which is really nice. And if there's ever anything that is going to be my legacy on this earth after I go, aside from my children, I guess that's going to be it, is that one panel.
I think there's a lot more that we can point out that as far as your legacy, Elliot. So
thanks. But I'm still young. I'm working on more stuff. Hopefully, I'll do that one comics panel. But.
And we've enjoyed everything up to now. And in fact,
thanks.
Let's talk about some of that. but just real quick, being that we were mentioning Sauron and dinosaurs, did you know New Jersey has its own state dinosaur?
You know what? I think I knew it, but I don't know what it is. What is it?
It is the Hadrosaurus fili. Polky.
So it's a duck-billed dinosaur, Hadrosaurus.
Yes, vegetarian, about 25 feet long, but can stand about 10 feet tall on its hind legs.
I did not realize that was the state dinosaur. That's a solid dinosaur. It's not one of the flashier dinosaurs.
No,
but it is.
It's not a Tyrannosaurus.
No, it's not a Tyrannosaurus or even like a Stegosaurus, which I think sometimes about Stegosaurus, and I'm like, why is this one of the famous ones? It's a weird dinosaur. But
you do know what the end of the Stegosaurus is called, though? That little part on the tail.
It's a Thagomizer, right?
The Thagomizer, that is correct. And
Pete, sounds like a late night infomercial.
Do you know what that came from, Pete?
What?
The Thagomizer.
Oh, I have no idea where to come from.
Being that Elliot said it, I'm sure he knows what it came from.
Well, if I'm going to throw the right, that in a Far Side cartoon, Gary Larson he says this was discovered by it killed its discoverer Thag, like, or whatever it is. It's named after its discoverer, the Thagmiser. And a paleontologist was like, well, it did not have a name before, so now it does.
Yes.
So you just used to call it the spikes at the end of the tail, I guess. But now it's called a Thagmiser. So kids at home listening, that's a lesson. Don't assume that everything's been discovered or decided already. There's still lots of, if there's a thing you don't know the name for, it's possible it doesn't have a name. Go and invent that thing. Put it in a comic strip.
There we go.
Hadrosaurus is a good dinosaur. I feel like I assume it was native to New Jersey. That's probably why they In fact, it's actually the first the most complete dinosaur skeleton unearthed anywhere in the world when it was discovered in 1858. Oh wow. And
the first mounted dinosaur skeleton displayed anywhere in the world 10 years later.
Was it displayed in New Jersey or was it displayed somewhere else?
It was a Museum of Natural History or something?
I think it may have been displayed initially in New Jersey, but what is it? The National. One of the U.S. agencies. Basically, it's now part of, like, for science. It is now part of, and I should have written it down, but
it's not it's not in New York at the American Museum of Natural History, or is it?
I don't know if it's there. It may be down actually D.C.
Oh, okay. That makes maybe it's at the Smithsonian Natural History Museum. That makes sense. All right, always stealing from New Jersey. Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like it says in was it Trenton? Trenton makes
the world takes. Yes, you're very familiar with the concept as well.
I feel like it's such a funny thing about growing up in New Jersey is that you have an instant defensiveness because I remember growing up it felt like New Jersey was like an easy butt of like sitcom jokes. Like on the Golden Girls, they would just be like something smells here. Am I from is this New Jersey or something like that? And it'd be like. Growing up, it was always like, there's a lot of beautiful things in New Jersey. It's a small state, but it's got a lot of good stuff in it.
The most densely populated state in the nation, too.
Yeah, it's the most densely populated state. It's where most of the cranberries come from. Like, come on. But,
correct. Right. Although that's not our state berry, it's the blueberry.
Yeah, well, that's the blueberry lobby was pretty powerful.
Came crushing the cranberry.
I remember when I was a kid, like we grew it always surprised me how little New Jersey history we would learn. That a lot of the revolution was fought there. The end. We just didn't learn any of that. There was the most battles actually of the American Revolution were fought in New Jersey, over 100 battles. Yeah. And the right down the street from my house where I grew up was the site of an incredibly minor, like maybe the most minor Revolutionary War battle, where it was based, I don't remember the name of it, where it's like basically two armies were marching past each other and saw each other and shot each other for a few minutes, and then just kept going. But that it just was never that it wasn't part of our education. And my wife, who grew up in California, California state history is such a big part of their public school curriculum, and it feels like a real wasted thing that. When I was growing up, we spent so much time learning about the European explorers that like bumped into the continent, and so little time learning about things that happened in New Jersey, and that our New Jersey forefathers were involved, and mothers, and mothers. Oh boy, got to cover all the bases.
And actually, there were more than four. There were five that actually were as far as the
nice classic.
That as far as like for the Constitution there, it's like we had five of them there. The Constitution, Declaration of Independence.
Declaration.
Yeah.
And so it feels like New Jersey has a real. I guess it comes from being right under New York, having that inferiority complex of always being on the defensive, but never making the most of it. It reminds me of professional writers. Professional writers are kind of the same way, where they're like no one we're really important, but no one treats us like we're important. This is in television and film. You can't do anything without a script, but nobody treats writers like they're important. And you kind of start to really like or become precious about that feeling of like superior inferiority, where you're like, I'm the best because everyone treats me bad. Maybe New Jersey has a little bit of that. New Jersey, be confident. Come on, it's okay. Talk about how great you are.
At the same point, tell me if you feel the same way. I think one of the things about New Jersey humor, like comedians, writers that come from the Garden State, I think there is that bit of inferiority and the self-depreciation.
Yes, yeah.
That comes with our humor, which actually works to our advantage.
In some ways. I guess so. If you want to be a comedian, there's an old bit that because I worked at the Daily Show for a long time, and when Jon Stewart was the host, and he's a real New Jersey guy and lives in New Jersey now again.
But bumped into him in Red Bank actually.
Oh really?
At an ice cream shop.
Oh, I believe it. He's it was really fun. There was a time when he another former Daily Show guy and me we went to visit John when he was working on a project a few years ago that ended up not going, and we drove down to Red Bank and went to the offices of this project, and we thought we were going to this like rescue farm that he's got set up, and we were like, can't see this farm? Yes. And then we're in the middle of Red Bank, the town, and we're like, I don't think this is a farm. Like there doesn't seem like that. But it was the offices were right near Kevin Smith's comic book store.
Oh yeah, the secret stash. Actually, yeah. Here's the thing. I don't know if you were aware, the podcast studio that we're coming through, like when you met Chris the engineer earlier, the podcast studio was started by Mike Zapsik and Ming Chen, two of the comic book men that are from Kevin Smith.
Oh, I didn't realize that, because it was very funny to have this office and the store there, because it was like, this is Red Bank's like Miracle Mile, like Hollywood, like this is the this is like the entertainment center of Red Bank, you know. But I think that there was a Daily Show bit we did once where it was on the subject of like kids being bullied or something, and John is like, what would my life have been like if I wasn't bullied? And it's this fantasy of him as the president, but he's also like a starting quarterback for the Giants. Oh my God. So it was like, I think the self-deprecation helps you if you're going to be in comedy, but you might get to other fields if you don't have it. But it does. There certainly is there's a rich vein of New Jersey comics, and like certainly it was a big leg up for me at the Daily Show when I worked there, that John was a Jewish guy from New Jersey and I was a Jewish guy from New Jersey, and we kind of spoke the same language, and and that when he talked, or the way he explained things, like I just understood what he was talking about, because even though we came from slightly different parts of New Jersey, it was still that kind of that same language and same feeling, you know, the desire to use as few pronouns as possible and just refer to things as that thing or this guy or over there, you know.
What you call it, yeah.
It's like if you can have a lot of conversations in New Jersey without ever naming the thing that you're talking about.
That's true.
But everyone around you, if they are from New Jersey, will completely understand what you are
exactly saying. And if they say and the other thing, you're like, yeah, I know the other thing you're talking about.
Yeah.
But here's a question regarding your time at the Daily Show. Well, first off, how did it come to be? How did you become part of the Daily Show with Jon Stewart? Like
it was a combination of like everything is like, you know, a real lucky circumstance and you know, hard work. Those things going together, like being ready for opportunities, I guess. So I was a screenwriting major at NYU, and I'd been a Daily Show fan since the first episode when Kilborn was the host. I've been watching it for years, and like I went to tapings of it when I was when I was in college. Oh, really? It was.
I have a story from. I don't know. I mean, if this is your time, but I'll tell you some other time. I've heard Kilborn's story, which is really funny.
Your story I haven't heard before. I've heard all my stories, but the
spotlight's on you, Elliot. But yeah,
I remember there was a time when there was like a blizzard and like 5 people showed up to be in the audience, and I remember being like, I would have shown up. I wish I had tickets for that day. But I needed to do an internship my last semester of school, and I was going to graduate a semester early because I could not wait to get out of school and start doing work. I did not. You know, some people, they really like to spend as much time at college as possible. And I was just like, get me out of here. Like, I want to have a life. You know, I was too fast for my own good. And through like a sheer coincidence, my dad met someone who was friendly with a guy who was at the time the associate director of the Daily Show, this guy named Paul Penalino, who is just a great guy. He's one of my favorite people. And, you know, and we've remained close ever since. This was in like 2002, and he's not a New Jersey guy; he's a New York guy, but you know, close enough. Anyway, but he said, "Okay, sure, I'll talk to him on the phone," and we had a phone conversation. And I guess I impressed him enough that he passed on my resume, and they interviewed me for an internship there, and I got the internship, and I had this great last semester at school where I was only taking classes 1 day a week. And then I was interning at the Daily Show 3 days a week. And then I was working at the Barnes Noble in Chelsea in New York, which is no longer there, 2 days a week. And then I had 1 day off. And it was like, this is great. I'm spending almost no time at school, which is fantastic. I'm getting to spend all this time at this TV show that I love. And I'm working at a bookstore, so I have a big discount when I buy books here. And I can, I was living so incredibly frugally that I could support myself at the time. Those were what I call my my boiled pasta with no sauce and hot dogs without buns days, where it was like how many meals can I get? Well, I can get this pack of store brand hot dogs for $1.50. There's 8 of them here, so that's like 4 meals for $1.50. That's good. Okay, I'll do that.
There we go.
So I interned there, and the short version of this is that they asked a production assistant position was opening up because a woman named Camel Smith, who's now an executive here in LA and Hollywood, she was moving from production assistant to researcher. So they need a new production assistant. And from that point on, I was just kind of like in the Daily Show family and got really close to a lot of the people who worked there. It really felt like the thing that I was looking for in college that I didn't quite get, which was the sense of like, oh, this is my community. Like I really felt that there when I was working there. And every couple of years I would get, for a little bit, I would get tired of the work I was doing, and an opportunity would magically open up above me, and I would like really work really hard to get it and then get it. And so I went from being a production assistant to me and another production assistant, this guy, Jimmy Don. We put together 2 like pitch segments to show them that we could make TV also. And we wrote and edited these 2 segments that very kindly Ed Helms and Rob Corddry, who were correspondents on the show at the time, they agreed to star in them. And we like made VHS copies of them, because that's how long ago this was, and left them on the desks with a cover letter of the executive producers. And that impressed them. But they also happened to be opening up the like segment producing department that handled all the footage and worked with the writers. And so they moved us up into there, and then a writing position opened up, and I tried out for that. And then after I've been doing that for a while, the head writer left to run John Oliver's show, and they offered the head writer position to me. And like, this is the very short version of it. This is over the course of like 13 years of me being there, basically starting as an intern. But it was all from that, like keeping an eye out for the opportunities there, and just like working as hard as I could, and getting a reputation as somebody who was always working hard and was pleasant to be around and that kind of stuff. And I started there as a 19-year-old in college. And by the time I left, I was the head writer of the show, and I had a wife and a child, and was in my 30s. And it was like, I remember that I left the show when John left, and there was a big party that night on the Intrepid, the aircraft carrier that stopped right off Manhattan. And my wife and I we were living in Brooklyn at the time. We stayed in Manhattan overnight, after the party. And we were walking past the studios the next day, and I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to have like an experience like that again. She said, oh, no, you're not. I'll tell you, like, you're a grown up now. Like, you're never going to start at a show as a kid and then grow up there. It's not going to happen. And she was right.
Do you think that, comedic writing, of such a high caliber, is that something that's an innate trait that, you are born with, or you develop and hone? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that there's certain people have it in them to be funny, and certain people do not have it in them to be funny. But the mechanics of how a joke works, like, you can tell that, you can teach that to somebody if they want to learn it. And even if you have the talent to do it, it takes hard work to really, like you're saying, to hone it, to get better at it, to make it. I'm a big believer in the idea that that your brain functions like a muscle, and the more you use it to do for certain tasks, the easier they get, or the quicker your reaction time. And while I was working on the Daily Show, I think one of the things that set me apart from maybe not all the writers, but many of the writers, was that I was very focused on doing that work to like actively make myself better or faster at working on these things. And so by the end of it, my time there as the head writer, I would almost never be writing first drafts of things. But occasionally, very occasionally, infrequently, there were times when John would want to do something, had like a serious message he had to give. And I would write a first draft of that just to help him with his thinking on it, and by that point I'd been working for him for, 11, 10, 12 years. So like, I understood somewhat how his mind worked and how he talked and the language he used and things like that. It helped me a lot while I was writing there to be like, I'm not writing for a real person. I'm writing for a character named Jon Stewart who talks like this and thinks this way. And if he's a character, I can put himself in that character mindset. And but I would really come up with a lot of like, so by the time I was head writer, I was rewriting scripts, and sometimes I would only have about 40 minutes to rewrite a script, and sometimes a lot of work needed to be done on it. And so I came up with methods and mechanisms, mental mechanisms I could use to write jokes faster, and to make it so instead of like sitting around waiting for inspiration, I had kind of like almost like algorithms I could run in my head to get to put jokes together. But it took a lot of time and a lot of like me on my own free time, kind of like working on that stuff. But as a writer, I've always been very interested in trying to get as good as I can at things actively, because I mean, that's the thing that if I learned anything from Jon Stewart, it's the difference between doing things actively and passively, and how when you do things actively and you take charge of whatever process you're using, you'll get better results and you'll learn from it. Whereas if you do things passively and you just kind of let yourself be driven by the whims of your imagination all the time, it's not going to be reliable work, and also it'll take time, and you're not going to be happy with it afterwards. But I remember growing up, I was always disappointed in this gap between. There's a video that Ira Glass made years ago where he talks about the gap between your taste and your ability, and how when you're starting out in a creative field, or really any field probably, but especially creative field, your taste for things is much more advanced than your ability to create those things. So for years, you might be writing and you'd be like, "This is bad writing. Like I know this is not good." Like I read. Like if I'm reading, this Jonathan Lethem book, why can I not write as well as Jonathan Lethem? Because I've read all his books and I know his books are good and I know what I like about his books. I'm reading.
Like you feel like, okay, why can't I just absorb that same formula and be able to reproduce or produce your own iteration of, Lethem? It's like,
exactly. And it's like, if you're a carpenter, you can appreciate, amazing carpentry. That doesn't mean that you can automatically make carpentry as good as that. So it's kind of very similar, where it's like, even if you have the talent, the ability, the dedication to develop that talent is what makes the difference so often. And you look at like the thing that comics always say about Jerry Seinfeld is that like Jerry Seinfeld like sits down and writes, like he works at it. Like he won't deliver something on stage until he's like worked it out privately. And that's something that is always flabbergasting, but it's, the way it's the reason that he's maybe the most successful comedian in the history of the world, is that that he, aside from just having a talent for it, like put so much of his effort into developing that talent. So with comedy writing, I think it's very much the same thing. And if you're only doing it off of your talent, unless you are so geniusly talented, then eventually you're going to stall out or burn out, or you need to hone it so that it becomes something that you can do reliably over and over again, and you don't have to worry that like I'm going to run out of creative juice someday. One of the things I learned from another writer of the Daily Show was that like you don't have to worry that you're going to run out of jokes. That we were working on something once, and anytime anyone got up and walked past the room we were in to use the bathroom, he would call them in and be like, hey, listen to this joke. And if they didn't laugh, he'd go, okay, forget it. We'll do a different one. And I was like, well, I think it's a funny joke. Like just because this one person didn't laugh, and he goes, it's fine. We'll do another one. And he was there's a man I learned a lot of lessons from to not do the things that he did in other ways. But I learned from him that like, you don't have to worry about running out of jokes. You can always come up with another joke. So don't stop with the first one you come up with, or even the third one you come up with, if it's not as good as you can do. That it was like the Daily Show kind of taught me the twin lessons of you have a limited time to do a thing. So you have to figure out how to get it done in that limited time. And if it's not perfect, too bad. Like you got to let it go because we need to tape at 6. And also, don't worry if that joke didn't work, throw it away, come up with a new one, because you can come up with it. There's a bottomless well of jokes in you as long as you keep, throwing the bucket down and pulling it back up again. So, I learned a lot. I learned more there than anywhere else, which makes sense because I started there when I was a wee lad, and I was there for a long time.
Right. Can a comedy writer successfully do stand-up and vice versa? Could a stand-up, and I'm saying like a good successful one. I mean, Jon Stewart's an example of that. He's both a writer and a stand-up, correct?
And a performer, yeah.
Yeah, and a performer. And I'm wondering, does that hold true for most comedy writers or most In other words, are they interchangeable? I guess is what I'm asking you. Like, would you feel confident going up at Caroline's or Comedy Cellar and doing? And how do you think you would do?
Well, you used to actually have your own show, wasn't it? Was it Kalen?
I did a bunch of shows called like the Midnight Kalen and the
Midnight Kalen. Thank you.
So I think they're different skills. I think there's a lot of overlap, but and I used to do stand up, but it was one of those things where I think if I had really worked hard at it, I think I could have been a solid middle stand up. I don't think I ever would have been a big headliner, but I think I could have made it to doing the middle spot where you're not the opening act anymore. You're doing, 20, 30 minutes between the opener and the headliners can do an hour, right? 45. But I don't think I really had it in me to be a big headliner. But at the same time, you have to being a stand-up, you have to be able to perform and feel comfortable on a stage. And I used to do this show called the Midnight Kalen. When I was in college, I did sketch comedy with my friend Brock Mahan. We were writing and performing partners for a long time. And the writing was always much easier than the performing. I remember we did a show once, and we were very young. We were 20, 21 when we were doing this. And, even young, I think we were like 19. And we did a show once, and someone said, "You guys could be really good if you didn't look at the floor the whole time." And it was like, oh, we didn't even know we were doing that. Like it was
right.
And that we pointed out.
But a friend of mine, Eric Marzizak, he used to he ran a basement comedy theater, and I used to do midnight shows there where I would not write any material ahead of time. And the audiences were very small, and we would give people free pizza in the middle of the show, to get them to come in. And so I felt like I have no obligation for this to be a great show because we're giving them pizza. The tickets are very cheap. And doing that, it was similar with writing. Like it was a lot of good practice for being on stage and feeling comfortable on stage and going up there with no material and just having to come up with it off the top of my head. And so by the time that I had to accept an Emmy Award a couple years ago for The Daily Show. And it was and I was very nervous until I got on stage and I was like, oh, okay, this is a stage. Like it's a stage and there's an audience. A stage is a stage is a stage. It's you have to be louder, but it's kind of the same thing. And I'm only gonna be talking for 20 seconds anyway. But I think I'd be comfortable. So some writers can be really good performers and some performers can be really good writers. But it's all about the comfort on stage and also the preparation. I've thought about this recently because I've been thinking about when stand-up is kind of back in force and my kids are a little older, would I consider going back to doing low-level stand-up? Because I have friends who still do stand-up regularly. And there's part of me that wants to do it, but I'd feel like I really got to prepare for it. I've got to make sure I have enough material. I got to make sure that I've practiced it. And the practice is the part that always is the hardest for me because I feel more comfortable telling jokes to an audience than telling jokes to a mirror or to my wife and no other people. That feels more comfortable to me than telling a joke to 100 or 1,000 people. But I have a lot of nightmares where I am going up to talk or perform somewhere and I have not prepared at all. And because then it's one of those things where it's like, I can talk off the top of my head, but it's not going to be as good as it could be. And I'm so not used to, at this point, I'm not used to performing for audiences that don't already know me. We do live shows for my podcast, The Flophouse, but it's almost all people who know the podcast already. And the idea of going to a comedy club and going up for an audience of people who don't know me, if I was prepared, I'd be like, okay, I can do this. But if you to try to do it not prepared, I don't think I have that courage anymore. I think I had that when I was younger, and now I don't think I could do it. The hardest part for me with stand-up comedy though was hanging out at the club, which you have to do a lot of. And there was I think because I already had a day job, it would be like, okay, I'm going to go to this stand-up club. I'm going to hang out for an hour or two before my spot. Then I'm going to hang out for another hour or two afterwards because I want to be part of the community so that they'll book me for other shows. And it was just like, I don't have it in me. I don't have the energy in me to just hang out that long and hang out
and be ready for the next day for a daily show.
And exactly. And it was just I just didn't want it enough to put the energy into it. And there's part of me that wishes I had wanted it more because, like I said, I think I could have been a real solid middler. I don't think I could have been.
I think you could have been higher than that, Elliot.
We'll see. I think I also when I was starting to come up before I kind of semi-quit stand up. The comic who was the big up and coming comic there was John Mulaney, and I would go see his shows. And it was one of those things where it was like, well, I can't do that. I'm not going to be as good as he is. And so I think it was a little bit again of that gap between taste and ability, where it was like, well, I know I can't do that right now. So when I was younger, I had a lot of like, well, if I'm not good at this right away, why am I bothering to do this? Which is a terrible, terrible attitude to have.
Yeah.
Because you're never going to get good at anything. Yeah. And so I kind of wish I had had more of that sense of like, I wish I had started as like a teenager. There is a place in Millburn called Scotty's that has stand up. And I wish that like as a teen, I had started doing stuff there. Because then as a teen, you can be really bad and it's fine.
Right.
Because you have a lot of time. And you look at so many successful comics where it's like, oh, by the time they're in their 20s, they've been doing comedy for 5-10 years, already.
I know actually one comedian that I listened to their podcast, actually a fantastic podcast, especially for you, Elliot, being that you're a fan of classic movies and like like not so much like always the more recent releases, but like you're taking Pelham 1-2-3s and and prior, but Gilbert Godfrey. His podcast is one of my favorites. I listen to it regularly. Frank Santopadre, especially the research that he does.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But
you look
going to Gilbert. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. You're saying let's say you look at the preparation that Frank does on that show.
I know.
Astounding.
Oh yeah. And as he says, we're just scratching the surface. But Gilbert, he actually the first time that he went up for stand up, he was 15 years old.
Yeah. Which when I was 15, I was so uncomfortable in myself and so nervous. When I was a little kid, I had no nerves whatsoever. And the older I got and the more uncomfortable in myself I got, the more nervous I became. And my wife has said many times, she says most people when they're kids, they're kind of like less nervous. And as they get older, they get more nervous. But the opposite happened with you, which I think is true, is that the older I get, the kind of less I care what other people think. And so
that's how I feel.
Yeah. And so like I have a lot less, it's easier for me to get up on a stage and talk than it would have been when I was 15. But I wish I had tried that. You kind of need to want to do it so badly that you're willing to put up with rejection and bad audiences and things like that. And clearly with Gilbert Godfrey and with a lot of comedians, like that's what they wanted more than anything else. That's what they wanted the most.
Right.
And my fantasies when I was young were always to write and not as much to perform. And so it's like I didn't really get the performing bug until I was in college, and I hate to say it, it's almost like it's almost too late by then. And and like I went to in my high school, a year behind me in high school was Anne Hathaway, and it was
your high school girlfriend.
Oh yeah. That's it's a long time on my podcast, the Flophouse. It's a long running bit that we went out, which is not the case. I think she was in the same like ballet carpool as my sister. That's about as close as it gets. But she was the star performer at the. And it's a similar thing. She was the star performer at the high school, even as a teenager. And so it's like, and she would perform at Paper Mill Playhouse, the theater that I mentioned earlier. So it was like, oh, if that. And there was there were a couple other very talented performers at the school. This girl Emily Blau, and who would also perform at the theater. And so it was like, oh, if they're in the school, then like I'm not going to be as good as them. And I remember auditioning once for the high school play and not getting it, and being like, well, that's it. I guess I'm never going to do it. And like, what a bad attitude it is to have as a kid, to be like, I got this one rejection, that's it. Whereas now it's like now I know that being a professional in the entertainment business is, if you get one success for every 8 rejections, then you're doing amazing. Then you're doing great.
Right.
Then you're a professional.
It's when you look at the percentages, like versus like say like a sports analogy, it's like, 1 for 3, like, oh, that's a great batting average. Like you said, like 1 for 8, 1 out of 10. Yeah, that's actually what you're shooting for because
there's nobody who gets success every time, or when they do, they usually die young. It's usually like somebody like there's like a young filmmaker or writer or something, and it's like, oh, they came out with 3 amazing novels, or like your John Patrick O'Toole, I think his name was, who wrote Confederacy of Dunces, where it's like he wrote one amazing novel and then he died, and it's like, okay, well if he had lived, then he might have had not successes, but it's almost like we're like the filmmaker Jean Vigo, where it's it's only the ones who die young who don't have too many rejections, and the people who have long careers, it's full of rejections.
Right.
I had a friend. I'm sorry,
sorry.
Elliot. Continue.
I was going to say so, but don't take. I'm not saying then the key to success is to die young. Don't any listener don't take that as the lesson. Don't do that. Instead, live a long time and deal with rejection. Yeah.
And actually, I remember at one of the New York Comic Cons, I went to the panel of Bob's Burgers, and are you familiar with Eugene Merman?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. Eugene, said to the person, it's like, because I think someone actually wanted to be a stand-up, and what was getting used to failure. It's like, and Eugene said, yeah, get used to it, but just fail upward. That's all.
Yeah. Well, with stand-up, it's like you want to get so used to failure that you start to enjoy it, that you start to get pleasure out of the audiences not understanding what you're doing. And that was always the years when I did hang out at stand-up clubs, that was the most fun was when a stand-up would be on stage and he would tell a joke that the audience did not like, but you would hear the stand-up in the back go, ah. like one guy got it, and he's also laughing at how poorly it was received by the audience. And so you get to a point with professional comedy where you get more pleasure out of telling jokes that will annoy people and that are not good than jokes that are like beautifully constructed.
Right.
Jumping off real quick. Naturally not jumping off, but being connected to being that you mentioned it, the Flophouse. You started on episode 8. I Know Who Killed Me. How did that come to be? Your relationship with Dan McCoy and Stuart Wellington. How did you get to be part of this? And did you expect this to be the long running great show that it's been? With live performances, etc.
I think if we had expected anything out of it, we would have done a better job scheduling it in the very early years. Because in the early years, we would just kind of do it real haphazardly and be like, oh, it's been a while since we did an episode. We should probably do another one. Can you guys make tonight? I guess so. I don't know. And then, but Dan and I met through the comedy basement club that I used to perform at. It was a club called Juvie Hall that was on Bond Street in New York, in the basement of the Gene Franco Theater. And I don't know if the Gene Franco Theater is still there. Gene Franco is no longer with us. He's long since passed, but the Gene Franco Theater might still be there. And my friend Eric, he was running a space called Juvie Hall. And I remember very well meeting Dan and helping him and Eric paint the place, because we were painting it black, so it would be a black box theater. And he and I hit it off, and we became friendly. And he was also a comedy writer and sketch performer. And he started doing the Flophouse podcast with him and 2 of his friends from college, Stuart Wellington and this other friend of theirs, Simon, who I've never met. And and Stuart was and continues to be a bartender. He's now a bar owner. But I remember Dan saying that he really wanted to do a podcast with Stuart because Stuart was funny but was not interested in performing. And this was the only way to get it out. And Dan was looking for a medium that was not yet like a professional, that he was like, where can we get on the ground floor? Because it was a little too late to get into like web videos and websites, and podcasting was this new thing. Right. And they had me on as a guest, I guess, when Simon couldn't make it once, and then Simon moved away, and they brought me on.
Mysteriously disappeared into Indiana, I believe, right?
Yes, and I've never probed too deeply into it. I don't look a gift horse in the mouth, but I joined them, and it really became like just a way to kind of have a reason to hang out regularly, and then especially after I had children, it was like great to be like, oh, well, I have to hang out with these guys every 2 weeks because it's, I wish I could stay home, but I got to go do this because we've been doing it for so long. And it was years when we were doing it just as a hobby. And we started, I don't know how long we were doing it before it felt like, oh, people actually, like a few people listened to it. And we started getting like word of mouth things. And if we had really been on the ball, I think we could have turned it into something really big. But instead we were just kind of like, this is great. And then just kept going. And I've never been really good at like taking advantage of like breakthrough opportunities. But what was I going to say? And at a certain point we started getting paid for it. We joined the Maximum Fun Network, and it was like, oh, okay, now we're making money from it. And, they started the podcast, about 14 years ago. So I've been doing it for a little bit less than 14 years. and it's astounding to me because we started when we were all in our early 20s, mid 20s, and now for a moment I thought I was younger than I was, but the and now there's like, I don't think we'll ever be the biggest. We're never going to be like the top podcast even on our network, but like our listenership is very steady and we enjoy doing it, and we make enough now that I don't have to worry as much when I'm out of work for a while, which now that I'm pretty much a freelance writer is more often than I would like. And we'll just keep doing it until, I guess, one of us decides not to do it anymore. But it seems like it's going on.
I rue that day. It's like I don't want to think of that.
But like the idea that like I'm like, oh, like there's a possibility we'll have done this podcast for like 20 years at some point, which seems crazy. And I was thinking, how long can this thing go? Like if we did it for 30 years, we'd have this archive of like us getting older in real time, and going through all the stages of our lives while through the form of us talking about like Nicolas Cage movies and stuff like that. And like,
Merry Cagemas, everyone.
Oh yeah, Cagemas is coming up. Get ready, figure it out. What are you gonna do for the holiday? But it's just I feel really lucky and grateful that they asked me to be a part of it, because I don't know that that's something that I would have thought to do on my own, to get into podcasting. And it's just been a really rewarding, as irritating as it is when you are involved in what's basically a business with friends of yours, because the friendship starts to get overtaken at times by the business and show aspect of it. And that you have to take a moment every now and again to be like, wait, we're friends. Let's like have a conversation where we just talk about friend stuff and we don't talk about like this business that we do, but or this this show that we put out or scheduling.
Different? I'm sorry, Elliot. A quick question about how different, like when Nick and I went to one of your Bell House events. How different is it doing the live Bell House event as opposed to you just the three of you performing at in your respective apartments or together, with no crowd?
I think there's a real, so we do these live shows, often at the Bell House in New York, and we'd like to schedule another one over there, because I feel that's still, it's the venue I think we feel the most comfortable in. We just, they treat us really well, and it's, and it used to be walking distance from my home before I moved cross country, so that was really great too.
It's still walking distance. You just need to,
Yeah, it's like a week, just like a 10-day walking distance. But, when we're doing it, we used to record all three of us in a room. We'd watch a movie and then we'd immediately start talking about it. And and now we record, from our separate homes. And there's like a kind of a loss of energy there, which is too bad. But doing those live shows, it's super exciting to have an audience there. It feels like there's more pressure, because when I'm doing it with Dan and Stu, I would say they're my audience, but in reality, I'm trying to annoy them as much as possible. And so, so if I can make them laugh, that's great. But if I can irritate them, that's more valuable to me.
And if I could quote Dan for a moment, sigh. Yeah.
Thank you. But when we're doing those shows, like I really want the audience to enjoy it, and I want to keep that energy up and not overstay our welcome. We're really bad at ending the shows. And I'm really like, when I would do those shows I talked about at the Basement Theater in New York, those shows could go 2 hours of me just kind of basically talking, because when I'm on stage, I have very little sense of how much time is passing. But it's exciting. And there's this element of, especially when we do like question and answer at the end, there's this element of like, a wild cardness to it that is very fun. And so doing those, it's like, the whole day leading up to it, I'm a little anxious, and then I'm very nervous right before we go on stage. I usually make sure to go to the bathroom, like as close to going on stage as possible, because my nightmare is always that we'll be in the middle of the show and I'll have to pee or something. And the 30 seconds or so, 45 seconds when we're waiting for the like intro music to finish, we go on stage, is the worst, because it's like, I just want to get out there to get over with this moment where I'm nervous. And then once I'm actually on stage and can see the audience, then all the nervousness goes away. And it's like, oh, okay, they're all here to see us. It was a big thing for me when I realized, like, oh, when I perform, the audience wants me to succeed. They want to enjoy the show.
Right.
No one is going there hoping that I fail. So it takes that much pressure off, where it's like they want you to succeed, so they're helping you to do it, and they're going to laugh when you say something funny because they want to laugh, and that's going to make you funnier, and it'll help. You'll feel better. So it's like going out there knowing like, oh, these are fans, and they want us to, and we tend to have pretty well-mannered fans. They don't get I did a Doug Loves Movies podcast.
Oh, right.
Very nice.
And the fans
I tried to get that from the archives, but that's like,
I wonder if it's not available anymore. It was so long ago. And but the fans there, they love that show, but they are like rowdy and they're like hostile and like they'll throw
I've been
things
to
on the
one.
stage and it's super intimidating. Whereas Flophouse fans are like a little more like they're drinkers, which the Bell House likes because they sell a lot, but they're like quiet, respectful drinkers. Like they don't get too rowdy. And they're very pleasant. That our fans tend to be very polite and very nice and generous and they're very sweet. But
I want to say, correct me if I'm wrong. I think a lot of when I see other Flophouse fans and that, it's almost like it's a reflection of you guys, really. It's kind of like the way that you guys come across to us. I think it's like we're projecting that back to you.
Oh, that's right. That's a nice thing to say. I hope so. I mean, it's like the thing that I'm proudest about the Flophouse, which is, it seems crazy to be proud about doing like essentially a nonsense podcast for over a decade, almost a decade and a half, but is that there is a real like fan community, and they seem to be mostly really nice to each other. And I stay off the Flophouse Facebook page because I stay off Facebook entirely, and Facebook pages have a habit of turning into just like nonstop barrage wars. But but there's a real sense, I feel like, that like people meet and become friendly through the Flophouse, and it helps people through times that they have difficulty. And that's real, like, it's the thing that I got from Mystery Science Theater and from Marvel Comics when I was younger, was like, this is something that I can look to when I need it, and I can really rely on it when I need to get through times that are tough. And also there's this kind of welcoming tone and this like, come on in and be part of this world. Like this is, and there's other people like you out there. Like, I hope that we're providing that, a certain amount of that for people.
Definitely.
The thing about podcasting, this is my podcasting spiel. Like the exciting thing about podcasting, even more so than TV or movies or even live performing, things like that, is that you're kind of like throwing your thoughts and feelings into the void, almost like a message in a bottle. And it's going to get picked up by people that otherwise you never would have met, and you'd have no reason of knowing them, but they're going to hear it, and now they'll know a little bit of you. And hopefully, at some point you come to know a little bit of them, or at least that there are people out there. And so that there are people that you're connecting with. And it's just it's a very intimate medium, but it's a medium that like you just connect with people in a way that you wouldn't otherwise. And people that it almost creates this kind of invisible web around the country and around the world that you get to be a node in. That you don't
some might call it a World Wide Web, in fact.
A world, yeah. Thank you. That's what I'm looking for. Oh, I shouldn't have used web. I should have used a different.
You're excited about the new SpiderMan movie.
Yeah, always.
Right.
After seeing that teaser trailer, that was a full-length trailer that was basically just like the first 15 minutes of the movie condensed down. But,
yes.
But they're like going to those live shows. It's just to do a show and go to another city, and feel like, oh, there are all these people that I didn't know who want to have fun with us tonight, and it's going to be a good time, and no one's going to be a jerk, and like it's a really cool feeling. Like it's just a really cool, great feeling, and I miss doing those live shows. I'm hoping that things will we've been doing these kind of over the internet live shows. September 25th, we got one coming out.
Yeah,
Super Mario Brothers.
Super Mario Brothers will be talking about.
I can't wait.
6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Google. Is it Smart Ticks or Simple Ticks?
Simple Ticks, I believe.
Simple Ticks. Google Simple Ticks, Flophouse, Super Mario Brothers, and it'll take you there. But it's like those are fun, but it's not quite the same, because I like seeing like the people that we're talking to, and then afterwards, after every show, that we always have our like merch table signing line, and that's in some ways that's the most fun part, because you get to like meet the people that came to the show. And I don't know, it's just a really cool feeling, and it's something that certainly when we were when I joined the podcast, when we were doing it early on, I did not think we were going to like get to go to like Toronto or like Chicago or or places like that, or Boston or Seattle, and like do shows for people and have people like pay to see us come out there and like talk. Because also like we we do presentations at the top of the show, and those are written and we plan them. Stu's are not exactly written, but his are choreographed, you could say. But
I love Stu's though. Yeah.
Oh, his are always the best. He did one in Boston about the Fast and the Furious movies and it turned into him having like a breakdown over the concept of cars. And it was so funny. But from that moment on, after those presentations, nothing in the episode is planned. We have our notes about what happened in the movie, but we're just talking through the movie, and that people have the faith in us that we will be funny, just talking, sitting down at a table for like an hour, talking about, Godzilla King of the Monsters or whatever what other live ones have we done? Or like Hellboy or something. Like it's a real boost that people are like, I trust enough that they're going to be funny that I'm going to pay to see them.
And including also, like as you discussed earlier, the Q&A, like you don't know what cues are going to be flying at you, and what A's you're going to have to be ready to think. And in fact,
A's are always new, and the Q's can be very challenging. Yeah.
And in fact, you being on this podcast is because I had to cash in my my question points.
Okay.
I was there at Gods of Egypt. And
so you went to that show? Oh, so that was the show we did as part of
the Cake House
Festival. Yeah, Cake House, and we were in like this sweaty, gross basement, and there were bugs falling on people. Oh wow, that was. I was thinking about that show the other day, where I was like, that was the grossest place we ever been. And I'm sure, and I bet that their upstairs is probably nice, but the downstairs it was just like that. There were literally like bugs falling on people and falling on the table.
Like the Saw basement or something.
Yeah, and it was like a really narrow room, and the table we were sitting at was right up against the front row of people. So it felt like at any moment. Have you guys ever seen the poster to Soylent Green, where there's all these people being piled into like a dump truck? They're being picked like that. It felt like at any moment like that, people would just kind of come spilling over us,
like World War Z or something.
Yeah. Oh, I'm amazed that. Thank you for coming to that show. That was a little weird venue, but anyway. But you got a question to ask? Yeah.
I actually no. I got my question answered that night. And like I said, you gave me question points, so this was me cashing in my question points.
Oh, I see. Oh.
And just to segue really quick, my question was if you guys if the Flophouse was, say, Mystery Science Theater, like what movies and like characters can you picture yourself doing host segments? And wow. I think Stu was one of the what was it? The snake men from Jonah Hex, I think was Stu's answer.
Yeah, because there's anyone who hasn't seen the movie Jonah Hex, there's a part where a guy has to fight a snake man in a pit, and the snake man comes out of nowhere, you don't see him again. I think he's killed in that scene. But it's like you're like, what more interesting movie is going on? Off to the side of this one. But Stu loves that snake man. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, but yeah. Again, now segueing, how did you get involved in Mystery Science Theater? Like, I know you were a fan, and again, the Flophouse is, in a ways, like a bit of an homage to to the classic Mystery Science Theater.
Certainly heavily inspired by it. I mean, the Mystery Science Theater is what introduced me to the idea of watching a bad movie for fun, and and it's something that I've profited from, because you can learn more about writing and how to write well from watching a bad movie and taking apart why it didn't work than watching a good movie. Because a good movie is like a diamond. You're like, I don't know how to make this, but a bad movie is an airplane that doesn't work, and you're like, oh well, the wings are the wrong length, and this propeller is it doesn't turn. But now I know how to I know how to fix that. But it was my favorite show growing up, and when I was younger, if people asked me what TV shows would you want to write for, that and The Daily Show were the two top shows. And once I was at The Daily Show, it was like, Mystery Science Theater, I wish I could write for it, but I was a kid when it was on the air, and it was in Minneapolis, and I was in New Jersey, and so I saw that, but I'd always wanted to work on it, and they announced the Kickstarter campaign for what became the first Netflix season, and I was like, okay, I can donate to this, but that's not the full contribution I want to make. And I tweeted, I was like, how do I get involved in this? How do I work on this? And somebody tweeted back, and they were like, well, if you contribute a certain amount, then you get to be on camera for a moment. And I was like, that's not what I'm talking about. I need to make it mine. This thing that I love, I need to become a part of it. And my friend John Hodgman, who I'd met through The Daily Show.
Mhm.
He
Wait,
said,
wait, your friend John Hodgman?
well,
No.
we
No.
went through a period where we were enemies and then frenemies, and now we're just friends. So, in fact, I owe him a phone call. I have to call him back. He sent me Joel Hodgson's email, the creator of the show, who runs the show, and he said, "This is the email I have for him. If you're really serious, like, you could just get in touch with him." And so I essentially like cold emailed Joel Hodgson and said, "I'm a big fan of the show. Like, I just finished working. I just left The Daily Show. I just finished working The Daily Show. Like, this is where I want, I really beefed it up. Like, I won this many Emmys and, did this much stuff."
And that's WGA as well, right?
Yes. And they're both WGA jobs, which was I don't remember the last thing I did that wasn't WGA, which is good because I'm not really supposed to do anything that's not WGA. Now, I'm a union member. I'm a very proud union member. I have to stick with, I should, as much as possible, only do union jobs. So I emailed him and he wrote back and he goes, "Oh, well, we're just starting to put together the writing staff now. And we're looking for like a head writer. Like, let's talk." And he and we talked on the phone a bunch of times. We kept trying to set up dates to meet and they would fall through. And I was like, someone else is going to get this job. Like this, I got to meet him so I can make my case. And eventually he lives in Pennsylvania and I was in New York. And he's like, there's a diner in New Jersey I like to go to, I think maybe it was in Edison. I can't remember, that he's like, I like to go to meet people because it's easier to get there from New York than where I am in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania. And he goes, he's like, let's meet there. And it was like meeting, and I had never met him in person before. I'd been a fan of his since I was a kid. And it was like a spy meeting, like to be like meeting someone going.
Going back in his career, Agent J.
Yeah,
right.
Meeting with Agent J. Yeah.
SNL.
And going there, like this random diner in New Jersey to meet with him. And we just hit it off real quickly. And I was kind of in from that point. And it was my then agent at the time, who's no longer my agent. I remember he was like, I was like, they want to know if they can announce me during the Kickstarter campaign as that I'm going to be involved. He's like, let's hold off on that. And let's see if it really happens. Like, I don't know. And one of the reasons that he eventually was no longer my agent was because in that he was getting in the way of me taking that job, basically. And, but eventually, like, they hit their Kickstarter goals and we started up and just, it was, I thought someone was about to walk into the room. It was just like, I don't know, it just worked out really well. And working with Joel was like it was a fantastic experience. And he's a real, like, in the best sense of the word, like a real mad scientist. And it was a way of doing a show that was very different from The Daily Show. And I also learned a lot from, but also it was the dream of like, I'm writing riffs for the bots. And one of the best things about it was that Jonah, the host Jonah Ray, and I became very good friends. And like, I felt very thankful that I got to work with him and that now we're friends. We don't live too far away from each other, and
excellent.
There's a current season now that unfortunately I was too busy to be working on the riffs, but I'm working on the host segments. And
excellent. You are excellent.
Yeah,
That's great to hear.
So Jonah will stop by my house and he'd be like, okay, here are the host segments. Let's talk about, here are the drafts we have and here's what I think about them. And we'll talk about what to do with them. And like during the second Netflix season, he and I were working out of this office that he rented in South Pasadena. And it was just like the first half of the day, we would be there with the writers. The second half would be just me and him picking the riffs. And he would be like, every 20 minutes, we got to get up and stretch. It's not good to sit for more than 20 minutes. And so he'd set a timer every 20 minutes. And those 20 minutes, they would fly by. And it would be like,
I can imagine.
We've written 4 jokes or like 3 jokks. It's been 20 minutes. Like, we're never going to finish this. Like, it was a great experience. And I just wish that they, like, if I could do that show all the time and afford to support my family, then I would totally do it. But because the way that show works and how it's not a regular year in, year out job. It's just, unfortunately, I got to do other stuff sometimes.
And again, the way it's coming back now, it is quite different than it is previous iterations too.
That's true.
And I'm really hoping that this will be like the sustainable model where they can keep it going, for as long as possible. Because it's a show that it's such a unique show that it's hard for networks to program it. It's hard for them to see how it fits into their stuff. And I remember with Netflix, they were like, our algorithm will drive people to it. It's like, how can the algorithm drive people to it? It's unlike every other show that you have It's not, you know,
there's no. It's like, oh, if you like this, then you'll like. It's like,
yeah. And so my hope is that they can really harness the enthusiasm of the fans and the love fans have for the show to keep it going forward, which would be great. Which would be wonderful. And like they've got, you know, it's a show where everyone's working on it because they want to work on it, which is not always the case in professional television. You know, everyone is there because they want to make this show and they're excited about doing this show, which is exciting.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you're going to actually have two sets of how do you want to say, not adventurers, but you know, you're going to have Jonah again and his set of bots.
Yeah.
What's that? Oh yeah, subjects. Yeah, and you'll have Emily Marsh now and her set of bots. And because I saw her live on the last tour, and she was fantastic.
I unfortunately have only gotten to see a little bit of her performing in the shows, and I'm excited about writing for her because it's a new voice to bring on and a new character, and building the host personas is always really fun. It's like a real game of trial and error because you're figuring out who this character is, and you only have the host segments to really figure it out. You just have this little bit of the show, but the last couple live tours, unfortunately, they always seem to be coming to Los Angeles on days that I'm out of town. So so I have like the next. Are they doing another one? They are, right?
Yes, they have scheduled for, I think, 2022, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, and I think I have the LA date on my calendar already, and I'm like, I'm not doing anything else this day. Like I gotta see it. But because I've done some writing work for the live tours, and then I don't get to see them, and it's like, you want to see the stuff that you're doing. That was the most fun thing about, or one of the most fun things about the Daily Show was that, like, you write a joke in the morning, you tape it in the afternoon, it's on air that night, you're seeing it and it was there's no other, only late night shows work that quickly, basically. And
that's the turnaround of reaction is
and it's both, it burns you out, but at the same time it's super exciting to be like, oh yeah, I wrote that at 2:00. And now it's on TV at 11 o'clock, you know. But you also start to, there's a thing that I have where, and unfortunately I should go pretty soon after this, but
yes, absolutely.
Because I think we're reaching the end of nap time for my 3-year-old. But
understood, yeah. We'll race through very quickly another couple of things.
But there's a, and I apologize, we'd be able to cover more stuff if I didn't talk so long all the time. No, please. Every time I'm working on something, it kind of, instead of me lifting up in my mind to that level, instead that thing comes down a little bit. So like I co-produced a montage for the Oscars when John was hosting it.
Oh yes, the cowboy,
the cowboy,
the
montage,
gay cowboy.
Yeah,
the gay cowboy montage.
Brokeback Mountain was nominated, and it was like, instead of being like, wow, I can't believe I did something for the Oscars, I watched it on TV and was like, oh, okay, so like this is like the fake Oscars. Oh, I see. And so it got to a point with the Daily Show where I started being like, oh, this is a show that we make, and it gets piped into the houses of the people who work on the show. And if I was walking down the street and I'd see through someone's window that they were watching the Daily Show, I'd be like, oh, they get that channel that the people who work at the Daily Show get that shows the Daily Show. Like, so it's another reason that it's nice to do the live stuff, because you're seeing it with an audience and you're like, okay, now I know this is something other people are seeing. Like this isn't just a thing that I made that I'm watching by myself at home, you know?
Right.
Excellent.
Okay, what else do you want to talk? We'll do lightning round.
Yeah, lightning round.
Okay.
Yeah, for those that, again, we mentioned before that Elliot works on SpiderMan and the X-Men, but Elliot's recent project.
He's got visuals.
Yep, hold on a second. It's like Maniac in New York.
Maniac of New York. It's a comic book from Aftershock Comics. It is a story I've been wanting to work on for years and years, where ever since I was a young lad and saw the poster for Jason Takes Manhattan and was like, this can be amazing. And then years later saw it and was like, this is not what I was imagining all these years. And
this does not match what was in your brain of...
No, not at all. So the premise of this story is that a mass killer, an unkillable mass killer, as Stuart Wellington says, a death elemental, shows up in New York and is just killing his way through New York. And everyone is like, we've got to stop him. This is terrifying. We can't allow this to happen in New York City, the greatest city in the world, to have this killer running loose. But it's very hard to stop him. He's a death elemental. You can't shoot him. He just shrugs it off, and he doesn't. Right. He has the intelligence of a creature, of an animal, even though he's in the body of a man. He's
right.
And so
all he says is "her."
He just says her, and he just wanders around, and when he sees people, he goes into a killing frenzy, and then he wanders off, and he's very heavily influenced by the Man Thing, Steve Gerber's version.
Oh,
of the Man
wow!
And so it's years later now, and the city government, the state government, the federal government has decided it's just easier if we just live around him, and so New Yorkers have just gotten used to the idea that they go about their daily business, and every now and then this guy pops up and kills some people, and people go, oh, that's too bad. And they go about, and they just assume that's never going to happen to me, because how could it? I'm the star of my own tale,
Right.
And so the story is about this aide to the mayor who has lobbied to become the head of the mayor's Maniac Task Force, which is at this point just her. They've defunded it because it's that her job is essentially now just to be a scapegoat when the maniac attacks. But she, driven by personal reasons that we find out as the series goes on, she is dedicated to stopping the maniac, this thing. And she reaches out to this NYPD detective who was essentially put on the maniac beat as a punishment for testifying against her partner who shot someone. As we find out later, that's a spoiler, I guess, a spoiler of backstory. But and she's jaded and has to be convinced that no, maybe they can do something about this problem. And this new mayor's aide, her first day intersects with a day when the maniac wanders onto a subway train and is just killing his way through the train from one car to the next. And so
the maniac of Pelham 123, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm really wearing my influences hard on my sleeve.
Yes.
The Taking of Pelham 123 is my favorite movie of all time. And the city government would rather shut the doors on this train and not let anybody off and just keep it running than let the maniac escape and plague the city. And so these two heroines are going to try to see if they can save anybody from this train. And it's a 5-issue series. The collected edition is coming out in October from
Excellent.
Aftershock.
That's what I want to ask you.
Oh yeah, the trade paperback's coming out in October. The art is by Andrea Moody, and it's gorgeous. He does such a great job.
He's fantastic.
He's amazing, and it was really funny because it was like they were like we think he'd be great for it, and I'm like, he would be great for it, and I was like, wait a minute, we've worked together before. We did a story years ago that I forgot about for an American vampire anthology, but that the art looks great, and so the trade paperback comes out in October, and there will be a second series coming out next year in 2022 called The Maniac of New York: The Bronx is Burning. And this one, I think the first trade paperback, I think the title coming out is The Maniac of New York: The Death Train, and the next one is The Bronx is Burning. And I just actually sent in. The next one is a 4-issue series, but the issues are a little longer. And I just sent in the script for issue 4 to my editors, and it was like there's some stuff in it that I've wanted to do since we started with the first issue of the Death Train series, and in the second series, it's Harry goes to a school. Oh, all sorts of terrible things happen. And I will say ahead of time, for the Squeamish, I did not have the heart to go as far with the school sequence as could have been done. But
Understood.
I think when I was younger, I might have gone crazy with it. But as a father, I was like, I don't. I'll be squeamish here. He does kill people at school, but it's not as bad as it could be. And there's a scene. So the opening of the first issue, it's this what becomes called the Times Square Massacre, where it's New Year's Day 2016 or New Year's Eve 2016, and the maniac appears in Times Square and just is slaughtering people, but you don't see it. You just kind of see the aftermath of it. And there's a sequence in the 4th issue, the final issue of the second series, The Bronx is Burning, where I feel like we are, for a few pages at least, we're paying off what that would have been like in a different setting, in a different place, but playing what that would have been like to be just in this in a big crowd where the maniac's going nuts. And it's a scary book. There's some funny things about it. It's become a relatively relevant book. Just in terms of the idea of a problem that people have to put up with because there's not really the will on a governmental level to handle it, and there will continue to be things like that throughout my life and human history. So it'll unfortunately never be unrelevant. But but what it really is in a long way is it's the slasher movie I wanted to see when I was young and didn't get to see, and and characters that I've wanted to write for a long time, and I'm finally getting the chance to write them. And the reaction to the first series was really positive, and it sold much better than I thought it would. And so I'm really thankful that I get to do the second series, and I'm hoping it sells well enough that we can do a third one. Because I've got more Maniac in me.
Excellent. And thank you for also letting me know when the trade is coming out, because my local comic book shop, I was there yesterday, and I told them we have you on the show, and they're like, yeah, when's the trade coming out? And it's like, I'll ask Elliot.
We gotta get the word out. It's coming out in October.
Yeah,
because
it's
in time for Halloween.
Yeah, that's where somebody the prior time I was there asked, and you know what? Like, I haven't been to a comic shop before the pandemic. Do you have any good horror comics? I'm like, hey, I know one. And the same thing, the one, the son of the shop owner, he went, it's like, oh yeah, Maniac in New York, that's good. Yeah, but yeah, they had one comic left, issue 4.
Okay.
So,
well, thank you for spreading the word. I mean, it's been selling well, which is great. The first 2 issues went into second printings, which is the first time I think I've ever done anything that went into a second printing.
In fact, I have a second printing of issue 2 because I met your letterer, Taylor Esposito, at Free Comic Book Day. He loves it too, by the way.
He does such amazing work on it, and I feel like we just got a great team working on it. It's like this is the book that I had in my head when I was first thinking about it, and then first writing it, and it's. I'm so glad that Aftershock was on board and was excited about doing it, because they've been really great and easy to work with, and it's a great looking book. Like, the production on it looks fantastic.
Definitely.
And Taylor's letters look great. Andrea's art looks great. Like,
I was going to say, cool. And especially the watercolor that really makes it pop and really sets a scene.
Oh yeah, his the way he paints the colors is for the mood he creates is great, and I love his facial expressions. Like, he's such a master at very nuanced, and it feels like I can write in a script. I can be like Zelda is surprised, but kind of in an annoyed way, and he's like he gets that, or just like Gina thinks this is total BS. Like, and he knows what kind of face it's conveying. He does his character acting is just fantastic in it.
Excellent.
There was a time, there's this school in the second series, and I was I realized I didn't give him like photo references to what like a New York public high school looks like a PS looks like.
Oh, right.
And I was like, okay, well, here's what I was thinking of. And he goes, well, this is what I drew. And it looked just like the picture that, like, he had already drawn one that looked just like the picture that I was sending in. I'm like, no, I don't know.
I was going to say, at that point, did you say, get out of my mind?
Yeah, exactly. I've been really lucky to work with, I feel like in the comics work I've done, I've never worked with an artist who didn't get what I was saying and bring it up, even a level above what I was planning. And like, I've written 2 kids books, Horse Meets Dog and Shark and Hippo, and the artists I work with on that, with Tim Miller on Horse Meets Dog and with Andrea Tsarumi on Shark and Hippo. Like, it's with both of them. It was like, oh, you reached in my head and you pulled out what I was imagining it looked like and put it on the page. So I've been.
Where can people who are listening to get purchase that on your website or?
Oh, I wish I should get a website. That's a good point. I should. The 2 kids books are through HarperCollins, Harper Kids. So they should be available pretty much at any bookstore. I would say go to your local independent bookstore. If they don't have it, order it through them. If you don't have a local independent bookstore, then you can get it through, Amazon or anywhere else. But always better to support in any right. There's I guess if you're in New Jersey, if you're near Maplewood, then go to Words Bookstore. That's in my dad's hometown, and that's a great bookstore. If you're in Brooklyn, then go to why can I not remember? This is terrible. The bookstore that I went to like once a week when I lived in Park Slope forever. Hold on.
Sure.
Community Books. I'm sorry, that's the name.
Community Books.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then go to Community Bookstore on 7th Avenue. Those are 2 great independent bookstores but really wherever you are, if you have an independent bookstore, go in there, see if they have it in the kids section. If they don't, ask them to order it. They can order Maniac in New York, the trade for you probably too. But
correct.
Or if you have a comic book store in town, go to your comic book store for that.
Yeah,
that's
and
what comic stores are for.
And if they didn't have the first run of Maniac New York, ask them to get the trade. and tell them to get ready for volume 2 of the
volume 2, Maniac in New York, The Bronx is Burning, 2022. It's not out for you can't pre-order it yet, but just tell them so they remember it. But we're a big bookstore family in my house. My wife's a librarian. She used to work at a great bookstore in Sonoma, California called Readers. If you're in the Bay Area, that's a great independent bookstore to go to too. If you're in Sonoma, go to Readers and get stuff. We're good friends with the owner, and he's great. But we're a real book family. We've said to our kids many times, like, we're not going to buy you. Like, if we go somewhere, we're not going to buy you a souvenir necessarily. But if we go to a bookstore, like, you're going to walk out with books. Like, it's hard for us not to buy books. And
excellent.
And it's why you can see behind me the bookshelf and piles of books that I haven't read.
Oh yeah,
excellent.
That are sitting on the floor of my bedroom. But
how many of those books came from the Chelsea Barnes and Noble?
What's crazy is I still have books on there from that I bought when I was there that I haven't read yet, which is nuts. And my wife will be like,
"Oh no,
you've been carrying this book around since before we met. Like, can you not?" And I'm like, "No, because I'm going to read it." Like,
oh no, and wait, you're stacking them. It's like, please don't say. It's like all of a sudden you're ready to read them, and all of a sudden you drop your glasses. Like, no, there was going to be time.
No, there was time now. When we moved from one of the great things about working at the Daily Show was that we got so many books from people who wanted to be guests on the show. And the talent booker guest booker at the time, Hillary Kuhn, every month or so, you just hear on the PA system, free books, free books, free books. Yeah, upstairs, free books. And she had laid out all the books that had been sent to her. And I'm a big history reader and biography reader and stuff like that. And I would take these huge piles of books. And so in our Brooklyn apartment, there were these, 6-foot stacks of books all over the bedroom. And when we moved to California, my wife was like, "You're not taking those books with you. Like, you can take some books, but you are not taking every book that you have not read yet." And I'm like, "All right, that's fine." But I remember some of them, and I've been slowly
reintegrating them into the pile.
Oh yes, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, there are a couple books on there that I bought. There's a book of Philip K. Dick short stories that I bought at the Chelsea Barnes Noble that has been consistently on my to-read shelf for almost 20 years now. It's like, someday I'll get to it. Someday I'll read that book of Philip K. Dick stories. It'll happen.
Right.
Excellent. And being that you're a history file, if you're looking for a good history podcast, a comedian friend of mine, KP Burke, has a great podcast called American Loser about the stories of history that basically got regulated to like a paragraph in your textbook back in school. It's like, okay, let's delve a little more into this. And some of these characters that you've never heard of, it's like, why did we not hear about them?
Oh, I'm gonna have to listen. I'm not familiar with that one. I'm gonna have to listen to it. Thanks for the recommendation. It's funny, American Loser. When I was younger, I really wanted to write a screenplay about Charles Guiteau, the man who shot James Garfield, and I was going to call it American Loser.
In fact,
wow.
And that's insane, Elliot, because I believe the first episode of American Loser is the story of.
Oh, I gotta listen to it.
Garfield and Charles Guiteau. I'm trying to remember if it's Garfield or who's the other one? It's one of the first couple of episodes. Because he's truly one of the most pathetic people in American history, and just like, terrible. But and when you think about like when you delve into him and you get into Oneida, the people that make it, it's like wait, hold on, wait. That was kind of like wait, hold on a second. I think of that. It's like it's something on a wedding registry, not a. It's like it's like wait, hold on. They warped his brain. Wait, hold on. What happened here? He's a guy who could not get laid and ended up channeling that into shooting the president of the United States. Right. Like that seems to be his story. Who died? I forget how many days later. Like
it was
like
months
20
later.
days or 30 days later.
Oh, more than Garfield was lingering for months. And something I do want to write is I wanted to write, and I've done all the research on it, is a script about Chester A. Arthur, who was Garfield's vice president, became president when Garfield died. And he did not want to be president. And there for months, there were all these news reports where they're like, "Oh, Garfield's dying. He's not going to make it." And they would put the flags at half-mast in New York, and Arthur would be like, "No. And Garfield's recovering. He's doing better." And they pull the flags up, and Arthur would be like, "Oh, okay, relief." But eventually he became president, and he was except for one or two bad things he did, he was a fairly solid president.
Yeah, so, and I got to tell you, I miss presidents or people too.
Oh,
Yeah,
thanks.
you and Alexis Coe. That was a great show. And
It was.
although
I
think that there needs to be a disclaimer on that now too. So.
Oh well, that's yeah. Well, that was a podcast I did for Audible with the historian Alexis Coe, and we were going to do an episode for every president. We got about halfway through. I had my piece I wanted to do for a Trump episode, but we never got to it, which is ultimately okay. Like that's the but I don't think we would have liked talking about him too much. But
no,
I really wanted to do a thing about his relationship with his dad, which was not healthy. But what we got to do, that was such a cool job because it was like okay, we're doing Rutherford B. Hayes. I'll read all the books on Rutherford B. Hayes, which is not that many, and it was we'd look for people to interview that were interesting. And so like we did this episode on Theodore Roosevelt, and taxidermy was one of his big hobbies for much of his life. So, especially as a young man. And so like we went out to Queens to interview like the last taxidermist working within New York City. And he was a real character. And I asked him a question that I think really weirded him out, where I was like, I said, could you like hunt kill a cow and then carve a steak from it and then like get it mounted, but leave a space where the steak was, like leave a slot where you cut the steak out and so you could have it and you could be like,
have a little sign that says yum.
Yeah. And he was like, and he was like, I haven't really heard that. Like it was such a, it was great. If you can go out to Queens and meet a guy you never would have met before and really weird him out, then what other reason to be a podcast host, you know? So,
and I'm sure it's like, he'll probably be easy to find because are there many calls for Queens taxidermists? You know,
not these days. The business is all falling apart. I guess you got a lot fewer calls for mounting animals in Queens these days. But
I'm sure
it's good. But for other stuff that Elliot has done, please listen to the Flophouse podcast.
Thank you. Yeah.
If you can, also please check out Elliot's latest show, Housebroken, on Fox on Mondays. My wife and I love the show.
Oh, awesome.
And especially the episode you wrote, Boomsday.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
I got to write a 4th of July episode where Housebroken is a show. It's an animated show on Fox about a dog that runs a therapy group for other pets. And it's been
right there.
And I think it's such a funny show, and I really love working on it. I love the showrunners, Jen Crittenden and Gabby Allen. They're like, it's just such a fantastic show to work on, and I think the show is really funny and really like fun and smart. And
totally agreed.
It's on the season is just about to end on Fox, but all the episodes are up on Hulu, and we're gonna do. There's a second season next summer that we're writing right now, and we're gonna write some more episodes for the future after that. I think so. That was one where I was waiting for a lot of this year to find out if we were going to get to do more episodes. And if I was going to get to return for it. And I was so happy that Fox renewed it and that I get to return for it. And it's a super fun show to write. And it was we're all working remotely now, but it was such good medicine for me that during the real depths of the quarantine times, the lockdown times, the pandemic, that I was, instead of having to go into work and like write jokes about the pandemic, that it was like, all right, we need something funny for this cat to say. It was like, yes, that's great.
and that there was an episode of where the cats were basically doing a cats,
it was
that was fantastic.
Like a cats musical and stuff.
Yes.
And I've gotten to write some songs for it, which has been great. But that just that I can be like, okay, today I'm going to go into work and I'm going to write some jokes for a really sex obsessed turtle. This is like what I don't know what else I could ask for out of my career right now. That I got to do a couple seasons of a show where robots make fun of movies, and I get to do a show now that has where it's animals getting into trouble and saying silly things, and it's like I've had a very lucky career, very much so, and I think as long as I get to write for the Marx Brothers at some point, I'll have checked all the boxes and I'll do everything. So
and if that happens, please let me know, because I'd be quite interested in seeing how that happens because
Yeah, well, I'll work on it. I'll see. I'll see
well,
if
I do know that Chico needs the money, so yeah.
Chico, yeah, that's why they have to even beyond the grave. Yeah, Chico needs the money. Oh.
Chico.
That's whenever Gilbert Godfrey does his old Groucho impression where he's like explaining.
Oh yeah.
Like back then, we would send what were called letters, and we put these things called stamps on them, and you put them in the mail. And
it's fantastic.
Yeah,
but Elliot, thank you so much for being our guest today, and proving that, hey, guys from Jersey, we are funny, aren't we?
Yeah, it's a funny state. It's a real funny state. Well, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it, and it was super fun. It was great talking to you guys, and it makes me. I was just in New Jersey for the first time, in almost 2 years, and it was it's just makes me I have a newfound pride and love of the state that was once my home that I will never live in again. I live in California now. I'll never have to shovel snow. Being there, I was like, I don't remember it being this humid. This is crazy, but it was. But anyway, but thanks so much for having me. It was
thank you, Elliot.
A total
delight.
Thank
Wonderful.
You. Yes, and
Thanks.
Again, please check out Flophouse Podcast. Please check out Maniac in New York. Please check out Housebroken on Fox. Please check out Sharko and Hippo and Horse Meets Dog and any of the other great things. The Netflix Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Oh yeah, Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Yes,
Return,
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes, beautiful Time Traveler's Lodge, and
oh, I had to fight so
yes,
hard.
we appreciated it. That's all I gotta say. We appreciate it because
that was for the hometown crowd. Yeah,
that was for us.
One for the team.
Yeah.
And again, thank you so much for What Exit Jersey Stories. I've been Nick Franco.
I'm Pete Riario.
And Elliot.
Oh, and I'm Elliot Galen. We do this on our podcast, and the same thing happens every time.
You pulled the Dan.
And I'm Elliot Kalin, Exit 50B, Millburn, New Jersey.
There you go.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.